At this time, we're going to ask Creekside to stand by with an honoring song for Oyate. As we introduce Dorothy FireCloud, is a member of the Sicangu Lakota Rosebud Sioux tribe here in South Dakota. In October 2020, Ms. FireCloud became the Native American Affairs Liaison Assistant to Director in the National Park Service. She is responsible for ensuring the NPS meets the requirements of the DOI policy in consultation with tribal nations, developing service-wide guidance, reviewing proposed policy and legislation to advise and support the Director of issues impacting Native American, Alaska Native, and Native Hawaiian communities. From 2012 to 2020, she served as superintendent to two Puebloan NPS sites, Montezuma Castle National Monument, Tuzigut, I believe I got that right, National Monument, and Verde Valley in Arizona. She first joined the National Park Service in 2006 as superintendent of Devil's Tower National Monument, Mato Tipila, as we say in Lakota, a site of significant spiritual connection to her tribe. Ms. FireCloud is a Juris Doctorate from the New Mexico School of Law and has been a member of the New Mexico State Bar since 1991. So we're going to go to Creekside for an honoring song for the women as we bring forth Dorothy FireCloud. Thank you, Creekside singers, friends, and relatives. Warm welcome to Dorothy FireCloud.
Good day, everyone. Let's see, it's my honor to welcome Director Sams to my ancestral homelands, the Sápa, the heart of all that is, a sacred site for all tribes that signed the Fort Laramie treaties and those that came before them. It is my pleasure to introduce the 19th National Park Service Director, who is also the first Native American to hold that prestigious office. Director Sams is Cayuse and Walla Walla and is an enrolled member of the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation in Northeast Oregon, where he grew up. He also has blood ties to the Kokapa tribe and the Yankton Sioux of the Fort Peck Reservation. Director Sams most recently served as the Oregon Governor Kate Brown's appointee to the Pacific West Power and Conservation Council, where he held a position as the council member from March to December of 2021. Prior to joining the Northwest Council, he served as the executive director for the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation. For 30 years, Director Sams has worked in tribal, state, and now federal government, and in the nonprofit natural resource and conservation management field, with an emphasis on the responsibility of strong stewardship for land preservation for this and future generations. Director Sams is a veteran of the U.S. Navy, where he served as an intelligence specialist. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration from Concordia College and a Master of Legal Studies in Indigenous People Law from the University of Oklahoma School of Law, and he speaks 6 languages. He currently lives in the D.C. area with his wife Lori and their youngest daughter. Recently, I had a conversation with a field employee who provided that he had never worked under a current or a former NPS administration that had had such a profound positive impact on how we do business within the National Park Service. I am sharing this as testament to his leadership skills and support for our mission. Director Sams is widely acknowledged by all NPS employees and Department of Interior leadership as a savvy and humble leader. Please welcome Director Charles Sams.
Good afternoon, my friends and relatives. My Indian name is Mockingbird with Big Heart. I am a keeper of the salmon, and I come from the place of the Big Springs, which is located now in what they call Northeast Oregon on the Umatilla Indian Reservation. And I'm so very, very pleased to have been asked to join you all and to talk a little bit about wilderness. I want to begin with the very concept of wilderness. In my own creation stories and my understanding of how I came about to be as an Attitite, or as a human being, is that Coyote was called up to the mountain of Pata, which is now known as Mount Adams in Washington State, and Creator told him this thing called human was going to be created by him, and that he needed to go and ask all of the animals on the earth for the gifts that would help create this thing called human. Now, in the English language, they would be called wild animals. To me, I've only known them as my relatives. For you see, my eyesight comes from eagle. My hearing comes from the owl. My skin comes from the hide of elk. My nervous system, my blood system, comes from my relatives of the plants. All of these gifts were great gifts to receive in the creation of me as a human being. The greatest gifts that we received in the Columbia Plateau was, of course, speech from salmon, and finally, the giving up of his entire body so that we'd be able to feed ourselves as human beings on the landscape. In return, salmon called upon this thing called human to create a covenant with the Creator, that we would be the stewards of these, that we would protect, preserve, and enhance all the gifts that we would receive from our relatives. And so, it's no wonder that when we think about wilderness in the English word context or the international context, it's not the same as those who are indigenous, especially to here to these homelands that we are on. The idea of untrammeled nature of wilderness was historically written into legislation without a full understanding and acknowledgement of the lengthy tenure of the first stewards of these lands, the indigenous people, the Natitite, the human beings. Though the desire to protect important landscapes was well intended, it wasn't always understood or acknowledged that wilderness for some is home. It is our home, and therefore it is not foreign to us. Today it's commonly understood that indigenous people used and occupied the lands that would eventually become the United States of America. Because like all humans around the world, we've manipulated our environment to suit the needs for us to not just survive on the landscape or to sustain ourselves, but to thrive, which also means as human beings, we've made our mistakes in the 30,000 years plus since time immemorial that we've lived on these lands. And we've learned from those mistakes to find better ways to live with the land, to live with the water, to live with the air, and to live with the flora and fauna. This recognizes that we must be and remain connected and committed to the protection of the landscapes and resources. The National Park Service adheres to a principle that wilderness is essentially unhindered and free from the intentional actions of modern human control of manipulation. But as we know, if we continue down that route without recognizing indigenous knowledge and indigenous ways of knowing, we will only suffer the consequences of not being able to manage these lands, not just for our own posterity, but for the flora and the fauna. And while this recognizes the importance of people coexisting with our planet, where people practice humility and are very selective and thoughtful about how our actions might interfere with the rest of the natural world, we must be mindful that what we do will affect generations yet born. The National Wilderness Preservation System protects over 111 million acres of federal public land through wilderness designation, managed by the National Park Service, Bureau of Land Management, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and the U.S. Forest Service. The Park Service stewards 44 million acres of designated wilderness. When combined with other National Park Service lands managed as wilderness per policy, over 80% of all National Park Service lands are managed as wilderness. And we are responsible for 85 million acres of the public land. Wilderness is a concept created by people, and successful wilderness stewardship depends on people. It means that individuals' cultural and communal connections to wilderness are recognized, integrating the diverse ways that people relate to, value, and use wilderness into communications, cultivating belonging and connection. We believe that federal wilderness holds opportunities for all people and that the benefits of wilderness extends to everyone. We also recognize that many laws, policies, and events in the decades and centuries prior to the passage of the Wilderness Act influence how people view the conceptions of wilderness and how they might perceive the Wilderness Act itself. Lands now managed as federal wilderness are the homelands of indigenous people since time immemorial. Many national parks that now include wilderness areas were forcibly taken from indigenous peoples and later from others systematically excluded from groups in particular. What we see today is the culmination of thousands of years of intentional land stewardship by the way people connected to these places. By honoring and recognizing these connections and using language and images that foster a sense of belonging for all people, the National Park Service staff have been empowering a new generation of stewards and garnering more support for conservation. By example, the National Park Service staff in Alaska have been exploring the wilderness concept in a way that honors indigenous connections to the land and celebrate values for these special places that are shared across the cultures, as you just heard from Ben, who is doing a fantastic job in Alaska. Wilderness offers many benefits, from recreation to helping support local economies through tourism, to benefits for mental and physical health. And we're exploring ways to improve accessibility, improving opportunities for more people to meaningfully connect to the National Park Service wilderness areas. As I remind my staff day in and day out, an old saying among my people is, until you are healthy and happy, the people can't be healthy and happy. And so we are trying to make sure that they are healthy and happy in the work that they do, so that they can share that healthiness with others. Again, a big theme of our work is stewardship, and I want to talk a bit about the strides we're making in increasing our stewardship with tribes across the United States. Under the leadership of the Biden-Harris administration and Secretary Holland, we're working to better meet our trust and treaty responsibilities in the stewardship of federal lands and waters. We've built on existing capacity while developing new training and tools to assist the field in this work. We continue to see relationships strengthen and new tribal partnerships emerge to address climate adaptation, sacred sites access, protection of traditional landscapes, and co-stewardship agendas setting on projects and programs. I've been an advocate for co-stewardship of federal lands for 30 years now, and I'm pleased to see national emphasis placed on this necessary work. I am confident that will make better land management decisions, acknowledge and hopefully heal some deep wounds. We will benefit from traditional ecological knowledge and better interpret the history of the lands we administer and all the plants and animals that live on them and depend upon them. It's been such an honor to collaborate on this effort with our partners at the National Park Foundation. In 2024, the National Park Foundation is supporting numerous tribally focused co-stewardship projects in multiple parks that will elevate indigenous knowledge, the protection of important cultural resources, such as sweetgrass, and secure the protection of important cultural resources. As of today, we have over 109 formal agreements with tribes. When I began in this position 2 years, 8 months ago, we had 5. We have more than 40 that are pending, and many parks are practicing co-stewardship without 40 formal agreements. Nearly 60 parks are doing that without a formal agreement. What this tells me as the National Park Service Director is that our staff, especially the new generation of community stewards and advocates, are working very hard to bridge the gap of misunderstanding between tribes and the greater public. The staff are hungry for indigenous knowledge so that they can find better ways to protect flora and fauna, to ensure water quality, to ensure fresh air, to ensure that generations from now can enjoy these lands and live on these lands the way that we as indigenous people have been doing since time immemorial. Now I want to share a little bit about our bison management and indigenous stewardship. The Bison Shared Stewardship Strategy is an effort to work with tribes and others to establish additional wide-ranging, healthy bison herds on federal and tribal lands. The strategy was developed in collaboration with the Department of Interior bureaus and authors nominated by federally recognized tribes. And I'm happy to report this strategy is due to be completed in October. The strategy was so important that we shared it with also our counterparts in both Mexico and Canada, because we see a future in which wide-ranging grasslands will interconnect throughout the Northern Hemisphere, and hopefully one day we will see free-roaming herds again in partnerships with tribes and states that will roam from southern Canada to northern Mexico. Together, we're developing a metapopulation strategy integrating next-generation techniques to conserve bison genetic health over the long term. It will create opportunities for partnerships with tribal conservation herds, where the department agencies will provide database compatibility and genetics expertise at no cost to participating tribes. The strategy will enable and inform the occasional movement of a relatively small number of animals among selected herds to ensure the long-term conservation of bison genetics. The department continues its strong support of tribal vision and initiatives to implement the ecological cultural restoration of bison on their lands. And by example, the Blackfeet Inini initiative, where Glacier National Park is working with the tribe to establish a herd that roams both the Blackfeet Reservation and the east side of Glacier and into southern Canada. Additionally, the Dakota Buffalo Range on the Rosebud Sioux Reservation is home to over 1,000 buffalo on over 28,000 acres. The department supported the establishment of this project by donating hundreds of bison and buffalo from the National Park Service and the National Wildlife Refuge bison herds. Yellowstone National Park has recently released the environmental impact statement for its bison management plan for 2024, reaffirming Yellowstone's commitment to tribal access to bison. The National Park Service will aim to preserve an ecologically sustainable population of wild bison while continuing to work with partners to fulfill tribal trust responsibilities and address the brucellosis transmission, human safety, and property damage. Midwest Parks managing bison herds are actively supporting further development of co-stewardship with affiliated tribes. In particular, Wind Cave National Park is moving to employ tribal members at annual capture and handling operations, and in 2021, dedicated a new low-stress buffalo handling facility in partnership between the National Park Service and the area tribes. All of this work represents a renewed commitment to work with the original stewards of the lands we have the honor to protect. We've made significant improvements over the past couple of years to maintain and grow our expertise in tribal relations, tribal consultation, actions for and to support self-governance. Dorothy FireCloud has helped lead that effort, and today I'm very happy and proud to say that her staff is fully staffed. We have now an office that has people, not just in Washington, D.C., but also across all the regions, that work directly in advising tribes and government-to-government relationships and helping improve the education of our staff in the field to recognize that when they took their oath of office to become federal employees to uphold the Constitution of the United States, that they are obligated then to uphold treaties and presidential proclamations to the tribes and executive orders. Because as we all know, in Indian country, Article 2, Section 6 of the Constitution holds that treaties are the supreme law of the land and supersede the Constitution, and that if our staff are not fulfilling their trust responsibility, then they're not fulfilling their oath of office. Each National Park Service region has a regional tribal liaison who reports directly to the leadership of the region, supporting agency decision makers and upholding our trust relationship and federal laws specific to Indigenous communities. As the tribal portfolio grew within the agency and across the federal family, the Washington office made the decision to create and elevate the Office of Native American Affairs as a staff reporting directly to me. And I'm very happy to share that as of last month, with the office being fully completed in staff, we will now strengthen our tribal relationship expertise across the agency. We recently hired Indigenous employee to manage the Tribal Historic Preservation Program. We're offering tribal consultation training for superintendents and developing courses on co-stewardship and Indigenous knowledge and federal Indian law. And we're holding quarterly co-stewardship webinars. The department has released its final report on the Federal Indian Boarding School Initiative, and the National Park Service is working with these findings to develop ways to shed light on these dark histories in a way that is respectful of the tribes themselves and how they wish to tell their story about the boarding school, not how we wish to tell that story. And we're collaborating with tribes across the nation on a new theme study that will focus on the Indian reorganization period between 1934 and 1950 to help broaden the understanding of an important chapter in American history, to reinforce across the nation that there is a third sovereign, the federal government, the state government, and tribal governments. And tribal governments have been here since time immemorial. As you can see, there is a lot of important work going on, and even more than what I've laid out here. And I'm so very proud of the strides we're making to ensure we're doing our part to honor and connect the original stewards to these wonderful lands that we all share. I want to thank you again for inviting me to speak here and for the work that you all do in educating people about wilderness as home. Wilderness as home for us as human beings. Wilderness as home for our relatives, the flora and fauna. That wilderness holds a place that will sustain us as human beings, but can also make us thrive. That work cannot be done unless you are out there each and every day educating, working towards that end. And I just want to say kutsiaya. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a great rest of your conference.